HIV positive. The words rang in Mirriam's ears as she looked at Dr. Amina in shock. At only 17, pregnant and scared, Mirriam felt like her whole world had fallen apart. How could she tell her parents this terrible news? Mirriam Nnamdi's story begins. A story about being wealthy, making bad choices, and facing the tough results of not thinking ahead. Born into the richest family in a small township, after her parents struggled for years to have a child, Mirriam was loved and spoiled. But as she grew into a beautiful young woman, the very privileges that were supposed to protect her led to her making poor decisions. This story will show us how too much privilege without guidance can mislead a child, and how the choices we make when we are young can impact us and the people we love. It will teach us the importance of balancing love with discipline, ensuring good values are taught, and giving material things to our children. In a small African township surrounded by hills and green forests, there lived a couple named Mr. and Mrs. Nnamdi. They were the richest family in a small township, owning a lot of land and businesses. But even though they had money, there was one thing their money couldn't buy for them: a baby. For 7 long years after they got married, Mr. and Mrs. Nnamdi tried to have a child. They went to doctors, used traditional medicines, and even asked the township elders and family members for help. But month after month, they were disappointed. Just when they were about to give up, something amazing happened. Mrs. Nnamdi found out that she was pregnant. You know how the township people gossip. When this news started circulating in the township, they all rejoiced because they all knew how much the couple had suffered to get a baby. But along with the happiness, there was some disturbance since the pregnancy was difficult from the start. Mrs. Nnamdi had to stay in bed most of the time. She couldn't eat much, and she was always very tired. The township doctor visited often, and each time he looked more worried. But even with the problem, Mrs. Nnamdi was determined to have her baby. After a long 9 months of waiting, on a warm summer night, a baby girl was finally delivered. They named her Mirriam, which means wished for child. She was the most beautiful baby they had ever seen, with big brown eyes and curly black hair. But the birth had been hard for Mrs. Nnamdi. The doctor pulled Mr. Nnamdi aside and said seriously, "I'm sorry. Mr. Nnamdi, your wife won't be able to have any more children because the birth complicated her chances of having other children." Mr. Nnamdi felt very sad. He looked at his wife, who was weak but smiling as she held their newborn daughter. And he made a promise to himself. If Mirriam was going to be our only child, then we would give her everything that she would ever need. As Mirriam grew up, everyone noticed she was a special child. She was very smart and always inquisitive, asking lots of questions about everything she saw. Her parents loved her so much and gave her the best of everything. She got new clothes, fancy toys, and yummy food. Nothing was too good for their little princess. The other kids in the township always admired and wished for Mirriam's pretty dresses and shiny shoes. They would gather around her and ask if they could touch her toys or try on her sparkly hair clips. Mirriam liked all the attention, and she began to feel that being different made her special. As the years went by, Mirriam grew into a beautiful girl. She was tall for her age, with long braided hair decorated with colorful beads. Her skin was smooth and light, just like a block of polished wood, and her smile could brighten up any room. But with her beauty, Mirriam started to become stubborn. When her parents tried to teach her things or give advice, she would cross her arms and say, "I know better, Mama." She didn't like being told what to do, even when it was good for her. When Mirriam turned 10, her mother wanted to teach her how to cook pap, a traditional porridge all the girls in the township learned to make. But Mirriam stomped her foot and said, "Why should I learn to cook, Mama? We have servants to do that." Her mother, Mrs. Nnamdi, was surprised. "What?" "Mirriam," she said surprisingly, "it's important to know how to do things for yourself, my child. What if you don't have servants one day or something bad happens to us? What then would happen to you?" Mirriam just laughed and replied, "That will never happen, Mama. We're the richest family in the township, so why would I ever lack money to employ servants?" After that, Mirriam refused to do any house chores. Even though her mother was angry with her response, she kept it to herself. She wouldn't force her to cook, clean, or even make her bed. Her parents didn't want to upset her, so they let her do things her way. As Mirriam became a teenager, she got even more difficult to control. She wanted the latest clothes from the big city, even though they didn't suit the township lifestyle. She would want to stay out late with her friends and would always ignore her parents' concerns about her safety. Mirriam's attitude was getting out of hand, and Mr. and Mrs. Nnamdi didn't know what to do. They had always given Mirriam everything she wanted and were scared to say no to her many demands. They didn't want to make her mad or unhappy, but deep down in them, they knew something wasn't right with the upbringing of their daughter. When Mirriam turned 15, she started high school in the nearby town. This brought many new experiences for her. She made new friends and learned about different things like computers and science, which weren't taught in her township school. Some of these changes were good, but others weren't so good. Mirriam meets two new friends at school, Amanda and Susan. Amanda was known as the cool girl because she always had the latest gadgets and knew much about fashion and boys. Susan was quieter, but she always whispered secrets and gossip to Mirriam. Mirriam's parents were glad she was making friends, but they also felt a bit worried. They noticed Mirriam was changing. She started wearing makeup and shorter skirts, always texting her friends and giggling. She didn't seem to care about her schoolwork as much, but there was one positive thing. Mirriam also became friends with a girl named Mirabelle. Mirabelle was kind, worked hard in school, and planned to become a doctor in future. Even though Mirabelle encouraged Mirriam to focus on her studies, Mirriam often ignored her advice. One day, Amanda suggested skipping school to go to a party in the city. Mirriam was excited but nervous. She had never skipped school before. "Come on," Amanda said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be such a baby, it'll be fun." Susan added, "Yes, everyone will be jealous when they hear about it. You don't want to be left out, do you?" Mirriam hesitated. I am just thinking about what my parents would say if they found out I followed you without their permission." Amanda responded, "Please look for something to tell them, sure they would understand." But then she thought to herself, they never said no to me, and surely they would agree when I informed them that I just wanted to have fun with my friends. Amanda responded, "That's my friend, now you're talking." "Okay," she said, trying to sound brave. "Let's do this." The party was like nothing Mirriam had ever seen. Flashing lights, loud music, and many people. Some were drinking alcohol and smoking. Mirriam felt both excited and overwhelmed. A boy named Tom offered her a drink. Not wanting to seem like a little kid, she took it. The drink burned her throat and made her feel dizzy, but she liked how it made her feel grown up. At home, her parents had stayed up all night, worried and sick about her. When Mirriam finally got home around 3 a.m., she was exhausted and her head was spinning. Her mother pulled her arm to the corner. "Where have you been?" her father asked angrily. "We've been calling you for hours. Why didn't you pick up your calls?" Mirriam just shrugged. "Out with friends. It's no big deal. Please, you guys should give me a break." And she walked away with her shoes and school bag in her hands. His father turned to her mother. "Do you see how disobedient your daughter is becoming? Please talk to her, because I would not have her bring shame to this family." and he too walks away. Her mother followed Mirriam to her room, sat on the bed and started to shout at her. "Mirriam, do you know how worried we were about you? Do you want to give us a heart attack? We did not kill our parents, so why do you want to kill us early? Please don't you ever do this again." Mirriam was already sleeping, so her mother covered her with a warm blanket and left her room. The next day, she woke up with a hangover but managed to go to school. But Mirriam didn't listen to what her parents told her the previous night. She went out again after school. Her outing became a constant playbook despite her parents' advice. She kept lying about her whereabouts and started stealing from her parents too. At the end of the term, her grades got worse, but she didn't care. Her parent felt very angry and disappointed when they saw her report card at the end of the term, but she didn't care about their worries. She just wanted to have fun with her friends Amanda and Susan. One day at school, Mirabel tried to advise her. "Mirriam, I am very worried about you, my friend. Look at your results last term. Are you proud of yourself? You're missing classes and your grades are dropping. Don't you care about your future?" Mirriam in return laughed. "Mirabel, are you serious right now? Let me give you a little reminder, my family is not like yours. My family is rich, remember? Well, my father is a billionaire, Mirabel, which means my future is settled. I don't need to worry about my features if there's anyone to worry about here. That should be you." With that response, Mirabel looked disappointed and sad, so she replied, "Mirriam, do you know money isn't everything, right? It can't buy you happiness nor respect. Hope you know that, Mirriam." But Mirriam didn't want to hear it, so she asked, "What even gives you the boldness to advise me? Are you my parents or what? Please mind your own business." She walked away, leaving Mirabel to stand alone in the hallway. As time passed, Mirriam's behavior got worse. She started smoking and drinking more. She stayed out late and slept through school. Her skin became dull and she had dark circles under her eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Nnamdi didn't know what to do. They tried talking to Mirriam so many times, begging her to change, but every time they did, she would yell at them and walk away and say, "Please do not disturb me, let me live my life." She would scream, "You're ruining my life. You have left your own life. Why can't you leave me to enjoy mine? If you continue to stress me up, I promise I will just leave this house." Her parents were afraid of losing their only child, so they gave in. When Mirriam turned 17, she met Tom again at one of Amanda's parties. He was older, say in his 20s, and had a car. Mirriam thought he was the most handsome boy she'd ever seen or met. He asked for her number, and she gave it to him without thinking twice. After a few days, the boy gave Mirriam a call and asked her to meet him at a drinking spot close by. Mirriam sneaked out secretly and met with him. He brought her a gift and told her she was beautiful. Mirriam was happy to receive a gift from him and felt mature when she was with him. But the boy wasn't as kind as he seemed. He had an interior motive. He started to pressure Mirriam to do things she didn't want to do, saying she should prove her love for him. Since Mirriam was scared of losing him, Mirriam did what he asked of her. A few weeks later, Mirriam started feeling sick. She was tired all the time and was throwing up every morning. At first she thought it was just a stomach bug, but as time went on she began to fear something worse. She did not go to school for a couple of days, so her friends Amanda and Susan came to check on her, and she told them the symptoms she was having. The next day, Amanda visited a pharmacy and bought a pregnancy kit. She and Susan visited Mirriam after school. While in Mirriam's room, they asked her to go to the bathroom and do the test after a minute. She came back with the test kit, and the three girls sat on the bed waiting for the result. After 2 to 3 minutes, they saw 2 pink lines appear on the stick. Her heart sank with fear and tears. She was pregnant, and the 3 girls were shocked by her unplanned pregnancy. Mirriam was scared and didn't know what to do. Amanda and Susan asked her to call Tom and inform him so they could find a solution together. She called a couple of times, all to no avail. Her friend encouraged her to keep calling till she got him on the phone. She tried again a couple of times, and when she finally got him, Tom asked, "I see you've been trying to run down my phone battery with a lot of calls. What's up? Do you miss me?" Mirriam answered, "We need to talk. I am pregnant." On hearing this, Tom laughed at her, ha 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 ha, and asked her pregnant for who. Mirriam answered, "For you. Of course, who else?" "Oh," Tom replied, "how could you allow yourself to fall pregnant just once? Did I tell you I'm ready to become a father yet?" He shouted at her, "Please, if you know who got you pregnant, just go and look for that person and don't you ever call my phone number again." And Tom ended the call abruptly. She felt so disappointed and heartbroken and started crying. Amanda and Susan asked her what the problem was and why she was crying after talking to Tom. Her explanation of what Tom said to Amanda and Susan did not help her either. They both looked at each other and started laughing. They asked her how she was so foolish to allow herself to get pregnant for such an irresponsible person like Tom. They told her to stop crying like a baby. They advised her to get rid of it and forget about Tom. After a few minutes, they told her they were leaving and that they would see her at school when she was feeling better again. A few days later, Mirriam walked around feeling lost. She tried calling Tom a couple of times again, but it seemed as if Tom had deleted or blocked her number, so her calls kept going to the answering machine. When she felt a bit better, she went to school but she couldn't focus in class, and when she was at home, she wasn't eating or sleeping much either. She was restless. Her parents noticed something was wrong, but weren't sure what the problem was. When they asked her, she ignored them and told them to leave her alone. After a week, she couldn't keep the secret any longer, and she called Mirabel after classes and told her the surprise. Surprisingly, Mirabel didn't judge her. She hugged her warmly and let her cry on her shoulder. After a minute of crying, she replied, "You will be fine, my friend. Have you told your parents?" Mirriam said no. So she told her, "You need to tell your parents." Mirabel said softly, "They love you and they'll help you through this." Mirriam knew Mirabel was right, but she was so scared. "Look at what peer pressure has done to me, Mirabel. How would I place my face to tell my parents that their only child is having a baby at the age of 17? After all the privileges they gave to me?" Mirabel replies, "I know, my friend, but you don't have any other option than to come out clean now that the pregnancy is still early." With Mirabel's support, Mirriam found the courage to tell her parents. That evening, she found them in the living room. Her dad was reading the newspaper, and her mom was on her phone. She greeted them, "Good evening, Ma," and "Good evening, Dad." Her parents were curious because she hardly greeted them when she returned from school. They both stopped what they were doing and were looking at her. She started, "Mama, Papa," she said nervously, "I need to tell you something. I know I have not been the daughter you wanted me to be, and I'm sorry." Her parents looked up, worried. "What is it, dear?" her mom asked. Mirriam took a deep breath. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Mama, I'm..." Her mother asked again, "Mirriam, what is it? What is... I'm..." After like 30 seconds, she started again. "Mama, I am so sorry to bring disgrace to this family." His father looked at his wife, and the wife looked back, and both of them continued looking at Mirriam. The mother insisted, "Mirriam, what is it?" "Mama, I'm pregnant." The room went silent. Her dad dropped his newspaper, and her mom's face went pale. For a moment, no one spoke. Mirriam fell to her knees, crying, "I'm sorry, Mama. I know you've been good to me, but I listened to bad friends. Please forgive me, Ma." Then her mom stood up, looking at Mirriam with disappointment. "How could you do this to us?" she asked. "After everything we've done for you, why would you choose to bring this shame to our family name, Mirriam? How could you? Who got you pregnant, by the way?" Her mum started crying too. Her father was very upset, so he got up and left them without saying a word. After a few minutes, her mom lifted her, sat on the couch and wrapped her hand around her tightly while they both cried for a while. "Oh, Mirriam," she said, her voice full of sadness. "My poor girl, we'll get through this," she said. "We're a family." Mirriam cried in her arms, pleading and asking her mom to beg her dad to forgive her. Her mother told her to stop crying and that she would talk to her dad when he was calm. She advised her to calm down and that everything would be fine someday. Although she was relieved at that moment, she felt a lot of guilt for what she had done. She was also glad that she told the truth, but sad about the pain she caused her parents. In the days that followed, tough choices had to be made. Mirriam couldn't stay in school while pregnant, especially with all the morning sickness she was having. She had to drop out with the advice from her parents. Her dreams of finishing school and going to university seemed to fade away. As people in the township heard the news, they gossiped and pointed fingers at the Nnamdi family. Amanda and Susan stopped talking to her, not wanting to be part of the scandal. Only Mirabel stayed by her side. As Miriam's belly grew bigger, she spent a lot of time thinking about her life in her room and the mistakes she had made. She regretted not listening to her parents and being rude to them whenever they tried to advise her. She thought about how foolish she had been all this while. After 8 weeks of her pregnancy, at night while rubbing her tummy, Mirriam promised herself to learn from her mistakes and be a good mother. One day, she would make her parents proud again. But there was something Mirriam didn't know. Something that would make her journey even harder. A secret about her body was waiting to be discovered. As the sun set over the township, casting long shadows, Mirriam placed a hand on her growing belly. She looked out the window, watching the township landscape. Life outside went on as usual, but Mirriam's life was completely different. She was going to be a mother. The thought scared her, but it also made her feel humble. Would she be a good mother? Could she give her child the love and care her parents had given her? That night, as the township grew quiet, Mirriam lay in bed, her mind full of questions and fears. She placed her hands on her belly and said a prayer. "Lord, forgive me for all my mistakes, but please give me the strength I need for what is to come." Mirriam had no idea that this was just the beginning. Many more challenges were waiting for her, ones she couldn't even imagine. As the weeks went by, Mirriam's stomach got bigger, and her life changed in ways she didn't expect. She stayed home most of the time, helping her mom with small house and kitchen chores, reading books about pregnancy, and taking care of herself. This wasn't the life she had planned, especially with her dad still very angry with her, but she was trying to do her best. One sunny morning, when Mirriam was about 12 weeks pregnant, she woke up feeling strange. Her head hurt, and she was more tired than usual. At first, she thought it was just part of being pregnant, but as the days went by, she started to worry. One evening, while sitting outside taking fresh air, she felt dizzy and a sharp pain in her head. She called her mom, who was busy in the kitchen. Mrs. Nnamdi left everything she was doing and ran outside to see her, looking worried. With a weak voice, she told her mum, "I don't feel well, Mama, please take me to the clinic." And her mother asked, "What is it, my child?" She put her hand on Mirriam's forehead and gasped, You're running a temperature. We need to see a doctor right away. Mr. Nnamdi drove them to the small clinic in town with total silence in the car. They got to the clinic and sat at the waiting since the doctor and nurses were busy with other patients. But when one of the nurses saw Mirriam's condition, she let them in quickly. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Amina, checked Mirriam carefully. She asked lots of questions and took some blood tests. We'll check the tests, she said gently. It might be a small infection, but since you're pregnant, we need to be sure everything is okay. Mirriam nodded, trying to be brave, but inside she was scared. What if something was wrong with the baby? She asked her to go and sit in the waiting area and wait for her name to be called again. They waited for what felt like hours. Mirriam held her mother's hand tightly, while her father walked back and forth. Finally, Doctor. Amina came back, looking serious. She called to see her in the office. Mirriam came and sat down. She looked at the doctor's face and asked, Doctor, "Is my baby okay? You look more worried than me." The doctor replied, "Mirriam, I want you to know that you're not alone, and we're here to support you." She said softly, "Your test results show that you are HIV positive, but with proper care, you can have a healthy pregnancy and the baby." Mirriam was speechless, and her heart sank to the floor. She felt like the groan should open up and swallow her immediately. The doctor continued, "Many women with HIV have healthy pregnancies and babies. I know you can do it too. Taking your medication as prescribed will help you and your baby to stay healthy. I know this may be scary, but we would address each concern together. You are strong, capable, and deserving of love, care, and support. So we are here for you and your baby, as doctor." Amina's words hung in the air. The room went silent. Mirriam's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with questions. HIV? How could this be? Then she asked Doctor, "But what does this even mean for my baby?" Mirriam asked with tears welling up in her eyes. Dr. Amina explained gently. HIV is a virus that attacks the body's immune system. It could lead to a serious condition called AIDS if not treated. But there is hope. With proper medication and care, many people with HIV could enjoy long and healthy lives. And the baby?" Mirriam asked, her hands protectively covering her belly. "There's a chance the baby might be infected," Dr. Amina said. "But if we start you on medication right away, we can greatly reduce that risk. We'll do everything we can to protect your baby, I promise." As the doctor continued to explain about treatments and the next steps, Mirriam felt numb. She looked at the ceiling and started talking to herself. How would I tell my parents about this now? Seeing the shock and pain in their eyes the second time would just kill me. At that moment, she realized the true consequences of her reckless behavior. Not only had she put herself at risk, but she had also endangered her unborn child and shattered her parents' hearts again. When Mirriam left the doctor's room, she was going toward where her parents sat and she froze. Her palms were sweaty and her mind raced. She had all these questions cropping up in her mind. How could I possibly disclose this to my parents in a way they would understand now? Her mother's concerned voice broke the silence. "What is it, my dear? What haven't you told us? What did the doctor say is wrong with you?" Mirriam looked down at her hands, unsure of how to begin. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. The shocking discovery sets off a chain reaction. Who will she trust with her secret? Loving parents or a loyal confidant? Her choice will change everything, so watch out for part 2 and find out